Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 2024 budget hearing. Are there any questions or courtesy of the floor comments this evening?
You'll indulge me, members of council, and I give you each one of these. Eileen,
Just say yes and sign it.
let's just go down.
Thank you.
So I know, council, there was talk about the rules for budget amendments, and so as outlined in the Home Rule Charter, I thought I would put out the 4 basic rules of the process. They've been talked about before in meetings, but this is the first time we've actually have written them down. And they're based on it's outlined in the Home Rule Charter. So number 1 is revenue must equal expenditures, i.e. we have to have a balanced budget. The executive is the only one who can project revenue. Therefore, a cut to an expense by county council or moving of money to an expense by county council requires a cut of an expense equally in the budget, okay? Now, there's a caveat to that, which I'll get to in number 4. Number 2, transfers in must equal transfers out. So as you're looking at it, the transfer into one org must equal the transfer out of somewhere else. That's pretty logical, right? But it gets a little bit confusing when you talk about special revenue funds and the general fund, i.e. the tax dollars collected by general fund revenue versus other people's money, okay? Number 3, all funds must remain balanced. And I say funds plural because the budget is the general fund plus all special revenue funds, okay? There is an amendment that talks about a full cut across all departments of 2.5%, which I know we'll talk about a little later. However, there's different funds and different rules, okay? Which leads me to number 4. Special revenues are funds used for a specific purpose. And if cuts are made, those funds are subject to return to the entity that gave them to us if they're not used for that specific purpose, i.e. brownfield money, right? If we don't use it to clean up a brownfield, we didn't draw the money down, it's in the budget that we're got that allocation, but we might not utilize it. Make sense? Okay, so that's all. I know we're gonna have some discussion about some other stuff, but thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to courtesy of the floor? Mr.
President.
Warren?
Thank you, Madam President. I know this is my first time going through the amendment process here, but I'm hoping we can figure out a new structure for this, perhaps next year. And I say that because I know that on noon Friday, amendments were supposed to be due. I did not receive an email with even a draft of these until yesterday after 5:30. It was after 5:30 that I received information. And with the things that we have going on in our lives, with families, with, of course, with a holiday coming up, and then with work, barely, I know, woe is me, woe is me. I barely had time to look over much of this, and I'm concerned about the transparency with regard to taxpayers, and again, the timing of this, less than 24 hours for us to be able to really look at this, dive into this, reach out to folks within the administration if we really have any questions. So I'm likely going to be not supporting a lot of these amendments here. I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm hoping that next year we can have figured out the timing aspect of this, because we need to be more transparent, I think, to taxpayers, and I think we need to be a little bit more kind in terms of schedule. So wanted to throw that out there. Thank you, Madam President.
Sure. Any other courtesy of the floor? Okay, moving on to number 2, review of personnel requests. First, under general government, Department of Controller, wait, I think there's something to this. Let me see.
That'll come in.
I'll come in, all right. First, we have upgrade of a one full-time audit manager. Are there any questions or comments regarding this personnel request? I guess what I should clarify before we go through all these is we did review these as part of the other budget. They've been in the book. This is just the point where we're kind of reviewing them again and moving them forward.
My question, so this was presented to us by Ms. Zirinsky earlier in the year, right?
Yeah. No, this was not?
No, these are all the changes that are in the proposed budget for next year.
Right, when Tara came here, I want to say it was maybe a month ago, maybe two. I think she added a position, she might have upgraded a couple.
They're in the book.
Are we talking about these or are these additional upgrades?
These are not additional. They're
These are in
all
the book.
either in the blue or white book. They are accounted for in the budget.
Yes.
And are all part of the executive's proposed balanced budget.
I understand that they're in the book and that they're accounted for in the 25 budget, but were these part of the presentation that Ms.
Oh, yeah.
Zirinsky gave?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what question, thank you.
Right. Okay. Department of the Controller, upgrade of one full-time audit manager. Are there any questions or comments? Would someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval? All in favor? Oh, no, we have to call for the vote on each one?
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft? Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Mr. Heckman? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Keegan?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8-0.
Thank you. Next, we have B, Department of Controller, upgrade of 2 full-time auditor ones, upgrade of 2 full-time auditor twos. Are there any questions or comments regarding this request? Can I just double check? I have this thing here, and I think this is it? No. There's a thing that says the one-step upgrade for Auditor 2 may be withdrawn. So is that one of these positions? Yes.
In the controller's office, as with certain other offices, they are promotable positions. So Ms. Zirinsky, if she advertises for one position and believes the person could be an auditor two, she could bring them in an auditor two position. So she has a set number of positions, but all those positions are promotable via an ordinance that council passed many years ago. It was the same rule when I was controller, and it's been that way for a while.
What I'm referring to is I have a letter here from HR that says there's a notification that one-step upgrade for an auditor two in the controller's office may be withdrawn as that employee gave their resignation notice. Please let me know if you have any questions. So I'm wondering if we need to amend this or.
No. No, the budget stands as proposed, and that letter, while it's outlined there, she can hire that person at step two. I've talked with Ms. Zirinsky about this. The budget stands as proposed.
Okay. Any other questions regarding this? Can I have a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval? I'm sorry, Ken, did you do that? Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Call for the vote.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
Yes.
Ms. Vargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8-0.
Next, we have the Department of Controller, upgrade of one full-time senior lead auditor. Any questions or comments regarding this position? Someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval?
Motion.
Second,
Second.
call for the vote.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Ms. Vargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8-0.
Next, we have the Department of Administration Conservation District. Department of Administration Conservation District, eliminate one full-time agricultural conservation specialist, eliminate one full-time clerical specialist, eliminate one full-time county conservation manager, eliminate 4 full-time county conservation specialists, eliminate 1 full-time engineer, eliminate 1 full-time program coordinator, and eliminate 1 county watershed specialist.
Lori, it says 2 full-time positions for conservation specialists on the resolution. You said 4, I don't know which one's right.
Hold on.
If you add them all up, and from the next page, it's
Aileen's saying that if we add them all up, it's a total of 4.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can we make a motion to
Motion.
approve? Second? Call for the vote?
Mr. Gafredo,
Yes.
Ms. Keegan, or I'm sorry, Ms. Keegan.
Yes.
Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner.
Yes.
Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Corpora.
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni.
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8-0.
Thank you. Next, we have the Court System and Corrections and the Department of the District Attorney. Upgrade 1 full-time administrative assistant, upgrade 1 full-time executive secretary, and upgrade 1 full-time office supervisor. Are there any questions or comments? Someone make a motion?
Motion. Second.
Call for the vote?
Mr. Corpora.
Yes.
Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni.
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo.
Yes.
Ms. Keegan.
Yes.
Mr. Kraft. Passes by a vote of 8-0.
Next, we have the Department of Court Services, Administration, Orphans Court, transfer of 1 full-time clerical tech 3. Are there any questions or comments regarding this request? Someone make a motion to move forward?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Corpora.
Yes.
Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni.
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo.
Yes.
Ms. Keegan.
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner.
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 8-0.
Next, we have Department of Court Services Criminal, upgrade 1 full-time lead deputy court clerk, upgrade 1 full-time deputy court clerk. Any questions or comments regarding this request? Someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval?
Motion. Second.
Call
Miss-
for the vote.
Mr. Giovanni.
Yes.
Mr. Corpora.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo.
Yes.
Ms. Keegan. Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner.
Yes.
Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8-0.
Next, we have Next, we have Department of Court Services Criminal, upgrade 10 full-time clerical tech 3s. Any questions or comments regarding this request? Hearing none, have someone make the motion to move
Motion.
this forward. Second,
Second.
call for the vote.
Mr. Corpora.
Yes.
Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni.
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo.
Yes.
Ms. Keegan. Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8-0.
Thank you. Next, we have Department of Court Services Corrections, eliminate 2 full-time corrections supervisors, lieutenant, create 2 full-time corrections supervisor sergeant. Any questions or comments for this request? Someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval?
Motion.
Tom will second. Call for the vote.
Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni.
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo.
Yes.
Ms. Keegan.
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner.
Yes.
Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Corpora.
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8-0.
Next, we have Department of Public Works, Operations and Maintenance. Upgrade 1 full-time operations and maintenance supervisor. Are there any questions or comments regarding this personnel request? Hearing none, can we have a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval?
Motion.
Second,
Second.
call for the vote.
Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Ms. Keegan. Mr. Gafredo.
Yes.
Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Corpora.
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni.
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8-0.
Thank you. Next, we have Department of Human Services. First, we have Program Centralized Data Upgrade, 1 full-time accountant 1, and upgrade 1 full-time accountant 2. Are there any questions or comments regarding this request? Can I have a motion to move this forward to the whole of council?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Mr. Corpora.
Yes.
Mr. Warren.
Yes.
Ms. Keegan. Mr. Kraft. Ms. Fargo Hefner.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni.
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo.
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8-0.
Next, we have Department of Human Services, Children, Youth, and Families, upgrade 1 full-time accountant 2, upgrade 1 full-time accountant 3. Are there any questions or comments regarding this request? Someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8 to 0.
Next, we have Department of Human Services, Children, Youth, and Families, upgrade 1 full-time program specialist 1 to 1 full-time program specialist 2. Are there any questions or comments regarding this position? Someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval.
Motion?
Second,
Second.
call for the vote.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8 to 0.
Next, we have Department of Human Services, Area Agency on Aging, upgrade 1 full-time accountant 2. Are there any questions or comments regarding this request? Would someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval?
Motion.
Second?
Call for the vote.
Ms. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8 to 0.
Thank you. Next, we have Department of Human Services, Health Choices, upgrade 1 full-time accountant 2. Any questions or comments regarding this personnel request? Someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8 to 0.
Next, we have Department of Human Services, Mental Health, upgrade 2, full-time accountant 1, upgrade 1 full-time accountant 2. Any questions or comments regarding these requests? Someone make a motion to present these to the whole of council for approval?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8 to 0.
Next, we have Department of Human Services, Mental Health, Early Intervention Developmental Programs, upgrade 1, full-time accountant 3. Are there any questions or comments regarding this request? Someone make a motion to present this request to the whole of council for approval.
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan? Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8 to 0.
Thank you. Next, we have Department of Human Services, Mental Health, create 1 full-time clerical specialist. Any questions or comments regarding this request? Someone make a motion to present this request to the whole of council for approval.
Motion?
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan? Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8 to 0.
Next, we have Department of Human Services, Drug and Alcohol, upgrade 1, full-time accountant 2. Are there any questions or comments regarding this personnel request? Would someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval?
Second?
Call for the vote.
Mr. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan? Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 8 to 0.
Thank you. Takes care of personnel. Mr. Giovanni, I hope you do your vocal exercises before we vote on the final budget, because it's a lot of fun. Next, we have discussion and consideration of proposed amendments to the proposed 2025 Northampton County budget and the proposed Northampton County Capital Improvements Plan for 2025. First is DCED COVID response grants, and future grants. Are there any questions or comments regarding the removal of $225,000 from DCED COVID response grants, future grants, to provide the money for Bi-County Rail Study, new line by Lehigh Valley Planning Commission?
I would like to ask a question. Can we have the County Executive, Mr. McClure, come up, or Mr. Barron come up and explain how this might affect the budget?
Hi, everybody. It's good to see you this afternoon. I'll try and be brief. I don't think it affects the budget as much as this was money originally intended for nursing at Graysdale's, agency nursing specifically during the pandemic, which was ripped from the budget and nursing at Graysdale during the pandemic. And I still think we need money for agency nursing at Graysdale going forward in the future. So I think it would be misguided to appropriate the money for this particular activity, and this is why. The Planning Commission is sitting on $4 million of our money already. It's just in their interest-bearing accounts, gathering interest month over month over month, and they're not doing anything with it. And it's well far more than they need in their fund balance to operate. It's well more than the 2 months that GASB 54 requires you to have on hand in case of emergencies. So they already have our money. And so the LVPC Executive Board and LVPC could grant that money to the LVTS, the Lehigh Valley Transportation Study, to do the study. So that's a source of money. Additionally, the LVTS has hundreds of millions of dollars set aside for the future of 22. And tens of millions of those dollars set aside in LVTS for future work on 22 is for planning. This is only $225,000 that they're looking for, and I've specifically asked LVTS, as a member of LVTS, as your representative there, to contribute that money, and I was told that that's not permitted. Now, I know that not to be true, but the fact of the matter is, we just saw Governor Shapiro transfer 150-some million dollars of federal highway money to SEPTA to operate SEPTA. So I don't understand why we couldn't use $225,000 of the hundreds of millions of dollars that we have in order to fund the rail study. Finally, I have, based on the posture of LVTS and some of the, I think, points of view of the people involved with this process, I do not believe that this study at this time is going to get us to where some of us want to go, which is passenger rail to New York City. So for all those reasons, I would oppose it.
I'd like to discuss why I proposed it. My understanding is that this money is allowable to be used for transportation type things. And while I appreciate and understand Mr. McClure's feelings about what they could be doing with their money, my concern is that Lehigh County continues to put money in and request a match from us. I wasn't willing to give a full match to LVPC for all of their efforts or their building, whatever, but I do feel that in good faith, if they are going to do a rail study that would benefit all of us, that I'd like to put the money in our budget and have it in a line item ready for if they do the study. And then if they don't get the money. So I'm not proposing that this go right out the door and into their budget. I'm proposing we hold it as a line item in ours until they're ready to do it. And I think it's a good first step, and I'm more interested in our relationship with Lehigh County. I can't tell Ms. Bradley how to manage her budget, but I'm supposed to manage ours, and so I'd like to at least make a small commitment to moving this forward, knowing that there may be more asked in the future, but I'm not dealing with that. I'm just dealing with what we have right now. And again, it has to be determined and committed by the end of this year, so that's what I'd like to do. Yes, Mr. Gafredo.
I actually agree with Mr. McClure on a number of items. My biggest hang-up on taking $225,000 away from, from Graysdale is that money is going to be used in a much-needed manner. And unfortunately, I think if we give this money to a rail study, it would be a drop in a bucket that would take billions of dollars for the proposed construction project that they'd eventually wanted to be studying to happen. And much bigger players would have to be supporting this than Northampton County, Lehigh County, and LVPC. So I understand the desire to want to be a good neighbor to Lehigh County, but unfortunately, I don't think that this is serious enough of an issue where there's enough serious talk for us to be putting our much more, $225,000 is a lot more important to us than it is to PennDOT, to the state of Pennsylvania, or the federal government, who would absolutely have to be on board for this project to happen, which they're not at this point in time, not at least seriously. So for that reason, I would much rather see that money used in Graysdale.
But this line item is not in Graysdale. This is in future grants. And we gave money to Graysdale, and we did an amendment years ago, and we gave them millions of dollars for
And
this.
even if it doesn't go to, if it's in our budget and it's used for something else, more tangible, I don't see $225,000 going to anything productive. I think this is a much bigger project than $225,000 can serve. That's just my personal opinion. And I've talked to other people at LVPC, and they kind of, without saying it, they agree that much more would have to happen for any actual movement in this rail project. So I understand it's something that people would like to see, but unfortunately, there has to be a commitment from much higher powers.
Okay, any other discussion?
I'd like to agree with Mr. Gafredo. I wanted train service down here from the city ever since I was a kid. And I know my mom used to take the train to Philly. You probably remember the train, Mr. Spadoni. So I also think that 225, if they have an actual real study of rails, we can find the money if we want to be involved in it then, with an amendment of some sort. If the administration and everybody feels that it's an actual viable deal. So I'm with you. I'm going to vote no to this amendment, although I do appreciate, Lori, you bringing it up, because I, like you, want a train to the city. I mean, I'd love to have it. But I want to see something. We've been talking about a train forever, since forever. So, and we turned all the trains, the rails into trails now. I don't know how they're going to run. They have to run over freight lines, so it's a big uphill push. So I'm not going to support the amendment. However, I do like your amendment.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Could someone make a motion to present this request to the whole of county council for approval?
I'll make a motion.
Could someone second?
I'll second.
Call for the vote?
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Hang on.
This is just to be voted on at council
Yeah,
meeting?
it's just to move forward. Oh, it's not?
Oh, this is the vote of it. Okay, then we're just voting, we're not making motions, we're just voting on the budget amendment, correct?
Yes. So if these budget amendments are not passed by motion at this meeting, they will not move forward for the adoption of the budget.
They died tonight.
Okay.
So if you want
then
to kill it, you can
I
kill it
revoke my
tonight.
motion then. I misunderstood what we were doing.
So, wait, so you're revoking your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Would anyone make a motion to present this to the whole of council?
I'll make motion.
Thank you. Could someone second? Dies for failure of a second. Next, we have general government hotel room rental tax 2,000. Are there any questions or comments regarding the removal of $5,000 from general government hotel room rental tax 2,000 Iron Pigs Charities and 3,000 from general government hotel room rental tax 2,000 Lehigh Valley Public Telecommunications Corps to provide $8,000 to general government hotel room rental tax 2,000 new line to the Bangor Borough 150th Anniversary Celebration Committee?
I have a question for that
Yes.
one. So this is the grants we give out every year with the hotel tax? And people apply for this? So why didn't Bangor apply for this? If they're having 100 and whatever, what anniversary is it, 150th? Okay, so if they didn't apply for this, And why are we giving it to them now?
Mr.
They did
Giovanni?
apply. The Bangor Borough did apply. This is for the committee.
The
that's
Bangor
putting
Borough
on the
applied and they were
celebration.
denied? They were told no?
No.
So just to clarify, Bangor Borough did apply, but they had multiple applications, and so we combined their award. They had an ask which includes the 150th anniversary celebration and general marketing. They asked for a grand total of $20,000, and they were awarded $15,000. And that was the committee recommendation.
So they have $15,000.
They have been awarded 15
So
of
they
the
have the-
20 they asked for.
Okay, so apparently they have the 8 for their party. So seeing that, I'm not going to support this because the other 2 charities actually, also applied for it and got their money. They got $15,000. So that's how the grants work. They do them by merit and they give them out. They don't get a second chance, so I don't think they should get, I think they have their money. They have enough money to party. Maybe,
Well-
cut back on something.
Their budget for this celebration for the 150th is $100,000. This money that I'm asking for is going to the committee, not the borough, because the borough's going to do their own thing. The committee that's organizing that celebration is asking for the $8,000, not the borough. But it is a Bangor Borough 150th.
You know what the committee's gonna spend the money on?
A parade, fireworks, a bunch of stuff for that whole week they have planned.
And just, we would need to keep them to a grant agreement because Northampton County does not fund fireworks. It's a safety hazard.
No, but it can go towards a parade, which is not a.
Right, but part of this money will go towards the celebration. It's, the 15,000 is combined to support the 150th anniversary and marketing, which of course, they're going to use some of that to market this event as well.
County is supporting
Yes.
$15,000 worth for this celebration, 'cause I think the celebration's fantastic.
Correct. Yes, we do too.
Wish I had this information prior.
If I could just clarify about that, this is the night where we do discuss this. So like,
But like, it couldn't have been like it couldn't have been like the previous Friday or something? Or Thursday, or, I don't.
maybe, maybe
I'm
not.
not trying to be
But it's here now.
disrespectful,
I
Madam
understand
Trying to be
your frustration,
disrespectful,
but, this is how we do it. And then you have some time in between the actual vote of it to, this is what we do and
It
have
was less
done
than
for
24
years.
hours, but it was less than 24 hours that I got the information.
Understand. And I think I explained some things last week that might come into play with that.
Okay.
But in the meantime, we're here tonight, so this is what we do.
Okay.
We discuss. And we allotted this time to do that, so. Any other questions or comments regarding this item? Can I have a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval?
Motion.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
No.
Mr. Kraft?
No.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
No.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corkbora?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 5 to 3.
Next, we have general government gaming host county tables future grants. Are there any questions or comments regarding the removal of $25,000 from general government gaming host county tables future grants to provide $25,000 grant to Bath Borough Hall and Firehouse to provide an urgent public safety issue solution by allowing them to purchase backup generators? Bath Borough does have matching funds available if necessary.
Again, I have to ask, they're getting 1.598 now?
No.
No, that's a revised amount of the.
1.573? Oh, okay, I see what we're taking, I'm sorry. So, did they, this is a hotel, I'm sorry, this is Casino Revenue Board money that we don't have anymore? We don't have a Casino Revenue Board, so where do these funds come from?
They still come from the casino, from the table games.
Correct.
So, but I just wanted to make council aware that Bath Borough did not apply for this project. So I do have concerns about that. Bath firefighters, Bath Fire Company did receive, just so council is aware, $15,000 for EMS mobile radios. So it's not like Bathborough is not getting an award. They're getting $15,000 for the mobile radios. That's what they applied for, not for a generator.
All right, so where's the $25,000 coming from? From the proposed casino? I mean, who are we taking it from?
Future grant.
Future grants.
Future grants.
It's coming from next year's budget, technically, money that has not been.
Hasn't even been awarded yet. So can't we wait until next year? I mean, $25,000 for a generator, as you know, is nothing. I mean, when you go buy a house generator, I mean, what kind of generator are we talking about? So,
No, it's money towards a generator.
okay, I would
They
think,
went out and got RFPs and didn't make the cutoff to apply for the grant.
okay, I understand that. So they have grants for next year, future grants. They can apply again for this grant when it comes up and probably get more money. You know, they can apply to Monroe County and this county and everywhere if they, you know, play the thing right. And I just can't see taking the money out, a future grant that we don't even have the money here yet, and giving it away to somebody to do a generator that, maybe do they have a cost for this generator? Do they have the budget done? Did they have a study done? Do they know what they're gonna
Yes.
build? Yes.
And it's, the buildings for the Bath Township Building and the fire hall, which are together. And they're trying to get it, they don't have no backup power, so they're applying for a cost towards that generator for both buildings.
And I feel for them being in the position they are, but they can apply for this grant in the spring or now, whenever they're coming due, and probably get more money, you know? You know how these casino grants are great. I used to be on the casino board for years.
And I talked to them and asked them, and they said 25,000 would be fine.
Well, yeah, if you ask me what I want, I'd take 25,000 too. I mean, that's a fine thing, but they need to I believe these people all need to follow the channels that are there to get these grants.
Right.
So I'm gonna
But-
be a no matter what you say. It's a great cause. It's great to have a generator in the building so they have backup. It's fire, I understand the whole thing. But they should apply the proper way. We do this every year and give people money that didn't apply. So I'm a no.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I'll just say, you know, as council members, we're 9 of us, we're elected, we get to sit here and discuss these things, and the budget amendment process is a time where, you know, if people come to us and say, hey, there was a grant I applied for, I didn't get, or hey, I didn't know there was a grant approval process, this is our opportunity to talk to our people in the community, bring things to the table, and yes, it is sidestepping the grant process. I can understand why that would get on the nerves of the administration that does this every day, but we are also elected people, and we have people that talk to us in our community, so if we see something that means, you know, something important to a community like Bath or, you know, Bangor, whoever we're discussing, I would say this is also another part of the process. And I might not vote for every budget amendment, but I also don't think we're, you know, doing anything outside of our powers. I think this is a proper way of giving people reasonable asks, even if they didn't get through the reasonable process.
And I agree with you, but what's called the council contingency fund that we used to use to do this kind of stuff.
I'm not old enough to know all these
Well,
old
I-
historic
And
things.
we still have a contingency fund.
Lot
Council has
less-
money we sit on for these kind of things that come out of nowhere, like the Easter hunt or whatever we used to give money to all the time, the Easter egg hunt. They used to come in and ask for money, we give out our contingency. I just don't like taking money out of future grants, that's all. I mean, I know we have a revenue line saying how much they're gonna be, but who knows if they are. So, and I'd like to see them apply, because I know they're gonna get more if they apply.
Yeah, if it was $25,000 to wallpaper the council chambers, I would say, okay, that might not make sense, but we're still doing a grant in the sense that we're giving money to a community that needs something that's, might not be a matter of life safety, but it is of, you know, basic necessities for what they're trying to do, serving their community. So for that, I will support this and other budget amendments like it.
Well, I'd like to make an amendment that they get the money if they do the matching contribution, like it says on your proposal here.
Well,
I believe it will.
I think they have to,
They
if
have-
we
they
approve
have
it.
Well,
It
no,
would
it
be
just says
matched.
funds available for matching it doesn't say that we're gonna give it to them if they match.
But if we give them a
it's-
grant, then they have to match
They
the
have, they have to
fund.
match it.
Doesn't it have to say that in the amendment?
That's the way it acted last year as well, because we
I
did
don't-
that for a couple fire companies, they had to match.
I think it depends on which fund it's coming from,
Yeah, but
doesn't it?
doesn't it have to say they have to have a matching grant to get the 25 in the actual amendment that we're passing at council? Doesn't that have to be part of the language? You got 2 weeks to fix it. You know,
I just, my understanding is that if it comes from a certain category, that it has to have matching, and it has to follow that process. And if it's just, we're giving them money, we're giving them money. So I see Tina nodding her head in the back. So obviously, if we're taking it from a fund that requires matching, they have to match it.
That they didn't apply through the regular process, however, which means I would be more confident with a requirement that they match the money.
If there's a way to write that up by next time, I
Well, you
guess
just
we'll
amend
do
it
that.
to- They'll match the funds.
I'm with me.
Looks like we have a solution looking for a problem. Everybody agrees that that should be in there. Why don't we add it?
Yeah, that's what I can make the motion to add
just a
that they have matching funds.
Just
Your-
a question before we go down that path, and Tina, if this were passed and approved by council, any of these monies are entered into by a contract with the county? And would that stipulation be in that contract typically? So that already exists.
Yes,
before we would
no
even
grant
turn
comes
the
out
money.
of our office without an agreement, and obviously their cash match requirement will be part of that agreement.
Right, so that already exists in the contractual relationship the borough would enter into if this were approved, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't
Yes.
see the need for an amendment to the amendment that's here, when the process itself will dictate that that has to be done.
Yes, the grant agreement.
Great,
And we
thank you.
don't distribute checks, it's on reimbursement. So they're not getting the money until they show proof of payment and they give us the receipts. And our agreements are rather lengthy, just for our own coverage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's make a motion to present this request to the whole of council for approval.
Motion,
Second,
Second.
call for the vote.
Mr. Brown?
yes?
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan? No. Mr. Kraft?
No,
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren?
No.
Mr. Corpora?
yes.
Adopted by a vote of 5 to 3.
President?
Yes, sir.
I do not, I just want to let council know, I do not mean to be rude,
Yes,
but
Lee.
my children have their parent-teacher conferences that I desperately need to get to. So I wish I could be here to discuss the rest of these amendments and vote no on them. However, and I'm not saying that to be smart,
No, I'm
but,
sorry, they want to make a big announcement.
yeah,
before
no,
you
I
have to
wanted to
go.
make it, I mean, I know it's being recorded and people are going to see a council member walking out for some reason. so,
Thank you.
Sure,
Be safe.
thank you.
Next, we have, any questions? This is operating across all divisions. Are there any questions or comments regarding the removal of $3,166,965, which is 2.5%, from operating to provide $3,166,965 to partially fund the P25 radio system?
I'll preface it with my logic behind this. Typically, using 2024, 2022 as example years, we will budget sometimes 120% of what we actually spend in the operating. I'm sure Mr. Barron will have an answer as to why we do that. The point is, the P25 radios were exclaimed to be a matter of, public safety, life and death. And I agree. I think it's a very important thing that we should be a part of, we should be doing. I just didn't think it should have been in a bond. So this is my solution for how to fund this partially. I would fund it over 2 years since it would be about a 2-year project. Last year, we budgeted $130 million for operating, and we spent $103 million. In 2022, we budgeted $109 million, we spent $76 million. I'm pretty much asking for $3 million to be reduced through the operating division across all divisions, which is a 2.5% reduction. And that would partially, if not half, fund the P25 radio system.
So I just wanted to ask, because I was reading over the home rule charter, does this, is this acceptable according to the home rule charter?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there's never really been litigation on that particular issue. I would say, at first blush, yes, it is. with several major caveats. But what my hope is, before we get into why I don't think this amendment is not only a good idea, I don't think it'll pass. I don't think you'll get 6 votes for it, and I will veto it. But what I'd like to do is have Mr. Weaver outline for you, because he's here and he's here for this purpose, outline for you where we're at with the P25, why we're there, how the money got accelerated into the bond for the P25, and what that calendar looks like. And if he explains that to your satisfaction, maybe you'll withdraw your amendment. And if not, then we'll have to have a conversation about, what the real world ramifications of a 2.5% across the board cut would be. And one of them would be that in my budget, I've proposed a step increase for the career service. That would be 0. The raises for career service would be 0 in order to help find the money called for in the 2.5% across the board. So if you'd indulge me, I'd let Mr. Weaver, because
Before Mr. Weaver comes
Sure.
up, can you justify or explain the 80% of projected budget for 2024, the spend on the operating? We projected 130 million, then we spent 103. Why the 27 million?
mostly vacancies, and I've been trying to in my entire 7 years here deal with the overtaxation, which essentially is what you're on. The overtaxation of our residents is why I cut them in 2022, and it's why I'm trying to get us to our own GASB 54 of 2 months of operating reserve in our fund balance, plus the financial stabilization fund. So, yes, it's vacancies, and the budgeting for those vacancies, generally speaking, that is the bulk of that money.
And then, is Mr. Weaver going to, is the bond, are you guys going to borrow money for the P25s?
He'll explain what our plan was before he asked us to include the P25 money in the bond. And if that doesn't satisfy you, I can further talk about some of the other things that'll happen if we do a 2.5% across the board cut. Okay.
Good evening, Council. Just a little history of the P25. In 2019, when we consolidated, I know some of you probably had a history from my budget hearing, we actually purchased the P25 system from City of Bethlehem with the expectation that we were going to expand it then into the other portions of the county. In roughly 2022, we got regular budgeted funds to upgrade the P25 system to its current version and move its core, basically its operating heart, to the 911 center. So at the same time, that kind of upgraded and prepared the system, got us to the latest, greatest version, cybersecurity and all that happy stuff, and brought it into our control of the county and not sitting at a tower site at Bethlehem City. It brought it into the center. Then after that, we looked at what it would take to expand it to cover what we were looking at is the 7822 corridor, the most populous area. And that was specifically what we call South PD, City PD, East PD, which basically is City of Easton, Bethlehem Township, Palmer, Wilson, all the way Freemansburg, Hellertown, surrounding the city. With that, we were able to secure ARP funds, $5 million, to add in at that time. Before we knew where we were looking at the 5 sites. We had to scale it down with Motorola and their pricing to do the 4 sites. So we actually are in the process of working on that system, actually optimizing it. It's somewhat on the air today, but not approved yet for public safety because we're working with Motorola in optimizing the system. And that's where we came the other night and asked for the grant that we got through Wild's office, the COPS grant, where we can add in Montana Mountain. And we got that at a pretty discounted price because between Site 1, which is the original system, Site 2, the new system, there was actually spare equipment that you keep on there. So we kind of inventoried, and we were able to get that site based off of the grant funds, and Motorola discounted it because it was part of the original engineering of that expansion of the City of Bethlehem system. So now, what happened with that is, as we were looking at, and this project hopefully starts winding down, at least on this, we'll call it the southern expansion of the P25, We just kind of looked at other opportunities with our consultant and even talked with Motorola just to see, what could maybe just get us a little bit quicker time frame. And that's where I reached out to Nicole, and she forwarded to Steve just our request to consider it and putting it as part of the bond issue because the original 911 center in 97 was part of a bond issue, and the current 911 center was part of a bond issue. So we just looked at it as an opportunity to get funding to maybe knock some months off of the P25 expansion. So that's where that request came for, and the administration entertained that. One thing in piecemealing, we've already did the system in phase, and Motorola has been very nice in allowing us to phase. It is actually very unusual for counties to phase. Usually, I know Lehigh County is going into a system build right now, and they're up at $30 million just to build the system. That's what it is to improve the site. If we start piecemealing, we're going to put assets or build tower sites that aren't going to be utilized because that municipality doesn't have the full coverage. So, for instance, if we would develop our Fox Gap site, we had enough fund to do one site. Upper Mount Bethel wouldn't be covered, so we couldn't put public safety units on that system yet because they would have a quarter of the area that's not covered, just because the northern part of our county is geographically challenged and we have to put certain towers in to cover those areas. The other thing that's entailed in building the system is we just went through a couple months ago where they take a geographic area, and it was the southern area, and we identified it was roughly 4,400 blocks. There were quarter-mile squares, and Motorola has to go out and test every one of them that can get access. And right now, they're compiling and looking at that data to give us the stamp that it's 95% of the coverage, 95% of the time, which is public safety standard for portable. Once we get that and we agree on that, then we can start loading units because it's public safety grade. We start doing these other sites, I can't test that entire area until I have that total infrastructure for the north in place. Otherwise, we'd just be wasting time and sending them back out to retest areas and retest them again. And Motorola will have us pay for engineering every time we add a site. And I know I'm probably getting a technical part of it, and I appreciate the desire to fund right aways. It actually costs more in the project. So we run what we call simulcast, and these tower sites have to be GPS timed, that they come up at the exact same time. And there's settings and there's engineering that goes into that, probably way beyond me. But basically, the waves need to match, and if the waves conflict, it actually cancels out the signal. So as we have a 4-site, when they add in our Montana site, they have to go and adjust. And as they add another site, they have to go back through the 5 sites and re-engineer that and change all their settings, their power, and their timing. And it compounds as you do it. Whereas you bring the whole system up, they do the engineering, they have the resources in place at time, and it puts the system up as a whole.
So you're suggesting that half of the money isn't enough?
Isn't it going to cover to do it fiscally responsible of what? You need.
So how much
it
of the
needs to be
money,
complete.
because you're still building out the southern sector, correct? It's
We're still building out, we're still working with Motorola, we still have our holdout for final acceptance. We still have
You guys
Montana.
don't pay the money all up front before you get all the completion of the services,
No,
correct?
we do everything by milestones.
Okay, so
Yeah.
wouldn't it be pretty safe to assume that we would probably only build down on half of that project over the course of the next 12 months?
I would have to contract, and I guess this is where Stephen, up for the amount of the project that I have.
The money anticipated for 2025 is in the current budget plan. So all the milestones are being met. We had a plan for this project prior to when the 4th site came up and the $1 million was proposed by Susan Wild's office and we got that COPS grant. We were able to add that site in, and it hit us at the right time so that we could engineer the sites, as Mr. Weaver talked about. So as we look at grant funding, money that comes in through the emergency management funds that we get, to be able to expand the radio options, plus what we have put into the budget for 2025, we'll have enough to finish the project and meet the current milestone, and we've adopted sort of what we call a pay-as-you-go style. Now, we abandoned that when we didn't abandon it, we proposed it in our 2025 budget, but we were willing to abandon that if council, which they did not, approved the bond. So there is no real public safety concern because we're meeting all those milestones for the expansion.
You can understand why that's a bit of an annoyance on our side, right? Being basically told that we were putting county firefighters and citizens at risk by not approving, and now all of a sudden it's not a public safety
The extra
hazard?
money and the enhanced timetable would have been great. Those letters came out of public support from those firehouses. My budget always had that in there. It's plain and simple in the language, and it was in Mr. Weaver's budget.
As far as the letters, this is probably the first, I guess in my 26 years, that we actually got a letter of support from fire chiefs saying, and wanted to encourage, and they wanted to know a way they can help. So instead of flooding here, they decided to get together and send a letter in the same way with the EMS Association. I can tell you when we did the conversion to the 500 system, it was a very rocky road and was fought fiercely by fire departments, from what I can remember on that.
Is it true that each radio costs like $5,000 for the P25?
They will range from 5,000 to 10,000, depending on features and things that they get with it in installation,
I was
whether it's
told
portable or
that it was about-
apparatus.
Could be about $100,000 per department?
Yes, it
depending on-
could.
Could be more for a bigger department?
It could, yes.
And that's my next question.
I know
Where's that
City of
funding
Easton has
coming
secured a
from?
grant for their fire department. They actually converted over, and their police department also secured a grant. A lot of the larger departments are already there for it.
How many fire departments are in the county?
There's roughly 36, and two
You say
rescue
that's another-
stations. Two
that's
rescue
another
stations.
$4 million, right?
Yes. And a lot of them are actually converting over, and that's where we just looked at an opportunity, if we're able to put this into the bond issue, that we can move the timetable up. And talking to the Motorola rep today, because I just wanted to verify and make sure that it was correct of what I was told previous, probably on a project this size with the 5 sites, and if the stars actually align, if I got approval today to do it, you're probably looking a year to a year and a quarter for it to be completed and start doing testing and putting units up it. That's as long as we don't have to develop tower sites. And what happens is, even though Motorola has already done an inspection of all our site, they still go out and they do the engineering. The ICE standards on the towers have changed, so for instance, we had a little bit of delay in the project because we had to bolster the county tower site, because instead of a 1/4 inch of ice, now they base it off a 1/2 inch of ice, so we had to put in some extra bracing, bring an engineer firm, so.
You're referring to the north sector for this?
This was what happened with our current project, and that caused some of that timeline change, so. So we were just looking at, this would just knock 6 to 8 months off of that process of moving on. So, you know, our next step as we complete these projects is to look at where we go in '26 with the next one, if there is another funding. And we'll continue to apply for a COPS grant. Susan Wild, we actually put in for the full amount,
What is the full amount?
which was the 6 million we put in, and they put it down to 900,000 and had to share it, so.
Did I not just get a letter today that we got some other kind of funding, and that, would that not apply to this project? Because it did mention the
No,
radios?
that is the interoperability grant. That is through the state, through our maintenance in CAD and our radio console upgrades and cybersecurity. That's like our standard every year, part of the 911 funding, your $1.95.
Can I just slow you down in this conversation? Because I was here when we bought this system. Remind me
Mm-hmm.
what year that was?
2019.
So in 2019, when we made the choice to buy a system, what was the actual plan? Because you're saying it was
plan was to
pay-as-you-go? Did I hear that correctly?
So, remember, the plan was pay-as-you-go, so there's 2 phases to this, as Todd has explained. There's the infrastructure that we're talking about on the towers. Then you have to buy the bands of radio frequency, correct? So, and those bands of radio frequency work with the radios that are purchased. So part of the plan when we put together the 2025 budget, and one of the things Mr. McClure and I talk about regularly is how we're going to afford the infrastructure for this, which we got a lot of infrastructure when we bought it from the city of Bethlehem, which was a good thing.
Right.
Because they were on some of our towers
Well,
anyway.
I was here.
Yeah.
But
And
I guess,
then-
can I slow you down, though?
Yeah.
I really want to slow this down. So we did this, and we've been doing this, right?
Correct.
But I assume when we made the original decision to do this, there was a short, medium, long-term plan.
It's been in every one of your capital improvement plans.
Okay, so then, so if I'm hearing everything correctly, then the $6 million is not needed right now. How much do you actually need right now to stay on target with the original plan?
What is proposed in the budget.
And that's it?
That's just for the south sector, right? The
Yes.
$6
Yes.
million was to get the north sector going, which
Yes.
was deemed to be a public safety hazard. Mr. Weaver, you're saying that, first of all, let me ask you this question. If you had the money today, would it be feasible to start the project considering you're still working on the southern side?
They won't do it unless the $6 million is available.
No, the
Yeah.
money's there. You
Yeah.
have the money. Pretend they have the money. Would they work on both the north and the south concurrently at the same time?
They would start, as they can finish the south, they'll start doing the north. They'll start
So they
mobilizing
would
different
finish the
crews.
south, which would still, how many more months out did you say until they're finished?
Hopefully, we'll start loading the first quarter of 2000,
And
this
they'll
year.
finish
Next
when?
year, sorry.
So it'll take another 12 months to finish that?
No,
that
well,
12 to
the
14 months?
south will be done, and then they'll start building, but there will be things, as they meld them in, they'll actually slow down that phase a little bit, because they gotta get the tower timing. So instead of taking the system down multiple times, they'll do it once.
So theoretically, we could set this money aside for this year. Next year, we could do the same exact thing, set $3 million aside, you have $6 million, you could start January 2026. Would that not be an acceptable solution?
If the funding is there and the cost is still the same, yes.
Well, that's, when you ask if it was allowed by the Home Rule Charter, the council has the power of the purse. And we're not taking the budget and putting it out of balance. We're simply saying the amount of money that you're projecting for the operations, reduce it by 2.5%. And historically, that will not make our budget go out of whack. It will not put us in a position where we can't pay our bills.
Except that our employees will not get their raise.
Well,
To
that's a
say that
Mr. McClure
$126
decision.
million
That's not our
is
decision.
the package for our
But he
employees.
just said that. I thought.
That's what he said he would
He also
choose
said
to
public
do.
safety was at risk, and now it's not. So I understand how the game is played. I'm simply saying we have a $600 million or a $520 million, $502 million budget. If we can't find $3 million for something that we're saying is a big necessity for fire safety, for civilian safety, then I don't think we're as creative as we think we are.
I have one more question before you do this, and Mr. Weaver was here, but maybe y'all can answer it together. Are we going to get to a point of obsolescence with this system,
Which system?
this P25? I mean,
Not until they
No. There's actually, part of it, when you said to slow down, when we purchased it from the city of Bethlehem, the next phase was to upgrade it to its current version, because it was actually, I wouldn't say it wasn't end-of-lifing, but it needed radio upgrades, it needed network switches, and the software had to be upgraded. So that brought it up to its current version of the system. And then once it was up to the current portion of the system, the next phase was then to expand it as far as we could with the ARP funds that were available, and that was the 7822 corridor. And as we expand, there will be software version updates, there will be network switch changes, patches. All that's part of our maintenance that we did at least for 7 years, that they take care of all that update. So as components may become obsolete, they get replaced and updated, just as the phone system at the 911 center and the radio consoles and the computers.
I have one last question for Todd.
Yeah.
It just left me.
well, take
It'll
that.
come back to me.
I appreciate it, and what I don't appreciate is like the little side comments, because I'm asking a serious question. It's not my job to know radios every day. I rely on you and his wisdom, and so like, we're just trying to do something for you here. So, I mean, if you think it's funny, keep laughing, but I don't. And it is, you accused us of neglecting public safety, and you have a solution here. It may not be the one you want, but are we going to invest all this money in something that's not going to be effective in? Or are they going to come up with something brand new, which it seems like they always do?
Todd, it's state mandated that everybody eventually upgrades to P25?
It's not a state mandate, but in any federal grant that is written and in any state grant that is out there, it requires the departments to purchase P25 capable radios. So they're already making them buy the features, the expensive radios that are capable of doing that. The disadvantage of buying the radio now and being forced to do it, because our department ran into the same thing, is I got to buy a radio with features that I'm not even going to use at that point. So it is part of the federal standards and part of that, and you're going to see a lot more of that come out because of the Butler incident of interoperability between Secret Service, state police, and the locals. Of not everybody was on a P25 platform, where it creates some interoperability. There wasn't a unified command post at that point. So that's where they kind of use that after action to leverage of why they're pushing these P25 radio standards. And And that's just one example, but even in a lot of the incidents and stuff, that comes out with a common operating radio system, or at least features of a radio system that can be interoperability.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, you were talking about my microwave joke?
Yes.
I apologize for making that. It wasn't even very funny. I apologize. It's not in balance, and the amendment's not in balance. Mr. Barron will explain that. And of course, we're required to have a balanced budget. But I'll talk a little bit about my original comment about how there won't be any raises for the career service for 2025. And Ms. Vargo Hefner talked about how that wouldn't be council's decision. Council's just cutting the budget across the board 2.5%, and then that would be put upon the administration to figure out where that money comes from. Ultimately, I think when I'm done, you'll see that's where it comes from. It comes from salaries and fringes. But let me start by saying, if you're cutting it across the board, you're cutting the court's budget 2.5%. You're cutting the DA's budget
Mr.
2.5%.
McClure, I completely understand.
Okay, well, let me just finish, so you have all the information that, when you consider your amendment. So, with respect to the court's budget, it is true that council is the ultimate arbiter of the court's budget, and you can cut it 2.5%. But there is a concept in the law called the administration of justice. And if the court thinks by cutting their budget 2.5%, say like 2.5% at the Juvenile Justice Center might be material to how they operate the Juvenile Justice Center, they might file a lawsuit alleging that the 2.5% cut to their budget is interference with the administration of justice, okay? The DA could do the same thing. Of course, she'd be cutting the controller's budget 2.5%, but she doesn't administer justice. And 2/3 of our budget is special revenue funds, money that comes from elsewhere. It's like at Graysdale, the Medicare and Medicaid money. There's no cuts there. The human services budget, there's no cuts to be had there, except you could cut the Irish people. The Irish people, that's county money.
Mr.
And-
McClure,
Sure.
I understand, but nobody's answered my question.
What's that?
$130 million was budgeted in '24, $103 million was spent.
Right.
It's $27 million. That's 20%. I'm
Right.
saying 2.5%.
Right.
So you're telling me at the end of 2025, $116 million, $460,500 is going to be spent.
So.
I'm going
all-
to tell you historically, that's not the
That,
case.
and I agree with you, and that's correct. And I have historically been trying to get us into a more appropriate balance when it comes to the overtaxation
And this is the year where it's going to happen.
of our, it's getting closer because.
22, it was $76
I think when we get to
million, and you
Mr. Brown's
budgeted
amendment, we're going to
$109
talk
million.
about what we're using to balance the budget. And I think I explained before that it's the,
It looks like there's $20 to $30 million in operations that we don't spend. And we are making a big deal about these radios, and I don't think there's a person out there that can argue, it's like, hey, if we spend less money on the operation side, it doesn't need to be 2.5% across the board. If you say, hey, this shouldn't be touched, but there's fluff here, well, that's the fiscal department's, discretion.
if I thought that there was 2.5% to cut out of the budget, I would have cut taxes. I absolutely would have cut taxes, but I don't think there is.
The budgets of the previous years disagree, and I'm looking at the numbers. So it's like, I'm not making this up, I'm just saying, if we spend more, or spend less than we project for, why don't we just project a little less, and then we'll have enough money for the radios?
I think when the books close for 2024, you'll see that we are moving this fund balance down to a place where it should appropriately be, which I think you've correctly identified for different reasons. And when they close on 2025, you'll see that we are down to the 2 months that GASB 54 says we should be at.
Okay, well,
It's tight. It's a tight budget.
understood.
So with that, I want to know if anyone wants to make a motion to present this request to the whole of council for approval.
Can I make a motion on my own amendment? I'll make a motion.
Do you want to see if anybody else would make it?
I feel good about it.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
No.
Mr. Kraft? No. Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Warren? Apologies. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 5 to 2.
Next, we have general government, gaming host, county tables, future grants. Are there any questions or comments regarding the removal of $10,000 from general government, gaming host, county tables, future grants to provide $10,000 to Columbia Fire Company, number 1, to allow them to complete their 2024 grant project, a tool upgrade special unit?
Well, I'm back to the same question. A 2024 tool grant project, they didn't have enough money to finish their tool grant project, whatever that is?
Right, they asked for 20, they got 10.
They asked for 20 and they got 10. So now you're coming back for another 10 to make it right. What about all the other people that asked for 20 and got 10 or 15 or 5?
But there's also fire companies got 20,000 for some stuff, radios, mobile radios, on the public safety grant, 2024.
Okay? So this is, you're taking it from future grants, gaming host table, future grants again, and you're giving them money to finish a $10,000 grant. So they matched this $10,000 grant with 10,000 from themselves?
They have the money to match, yep.
And can't they just sell a couple more lobster dinners at their big festivity to make more money? I mean, don't they have a club, they have a, where they raise money and all? Again, I don't like taking money, future grants, and somebody applies for a grant, and they got 10,000 for a reason. That's what you hire all these people to do these, overview these grants and all, and then they come back and you're giving them money again. I mean, I could have wasted our time and put all kind of grants for Bethlehem and, everywhere.
That you're right, as a
Yeah,
council mission.
I didn't, because it's not the right thing to do.
Well,
So
look-
again, I'm not gonna support this, because you're, again, going to future grants, and you're taking and giving money, again, to somebody who applied, got a certain amount, and now you're trying to make it up for them in the back end. So, again, I won't support it. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Any other questions or comments? Someone make a motion to present this to the whole of council for approval? Second,
Second.
call for the vote.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
No.
Mr. Kraft?
No.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Adopted by a vote of 5 to 2.
Next, we have financial stabilization, county contribution and transfer, county contribution transfer out, financial stabilization expenditure, other financial uses, financial stabilization, county contribution and transfers, county contribution and transfers, TI stabilization fund. Are there any questions or comments regarding the removal of $5 million from financial stabilization, county contribution and transfer, county contribution transfer out, resulting in a revision of changing financial stabilization expenditure, other financing uses to $14,920,600 and placing $5 million into financial stabilization, county contribution and transfer TI stabilization fund for a revised total of $16,850,000.
John, can you explain what the budget amendment is?
Yeah, the reason I put this budget amendment forward is when the Financial Stabilization Fund was created, in most I think it was 2015, the intent was for have a block of cash in the event of an emergency. There was a tax increase that was linked to this financial stabilization, and the target, I think, was, at the time, was around $15 million. Just, it was right after, I believe, one of the hurricanes, and if we needed to have that kind of money immediately, we did not have that. That was passed, and I believe in 2018, the ordinance that put this in place, that secured the funds, and I don't have the exact wording, but the wording at the time was that council would have control of this fund, not the executive. I was the executive at the time. I could not reach into that fund and use it for any other purpose without council's approval. In 2018, I believe the ordinance was, the language of the ordinance was changed. It was loosened to, from shall to may or may, can, and so on and so forth, which basically gave discretion to use the funds in a less rigorous manner. So I believe the funds should be returned. I don't believe the administration should use the Financial Stabilization Fund to balance the budget. I think they should be more aggressive in what they do in order to balance the budget work, and this particular fund should remain untouched. I did not remove the whole amount that was transferred out, but put it back to where I believe the original target was.
To be clear, if council moves this forward, amends the budget in this way, the budget is out of balance. The previous amendment knocks the budget out of balance as well. One of the things specifically, Mr. Goffredo's numbers for the 3.3 million are not correct. And he is taking lumps of money that don't necessarily relate together. I will explain that at another time, but right now, he's taking the expenses and the transfers in, but he's not counting any of the transfers out of the budget.
Are you talking about the previous, or are you talking about this?
Previous and this one.
Well, can we
And
just stick to
so
this
we'll
one?
we'll stick to this one, that's fine. The other thing is, the ordinance calls for 5 to 15% of the general fund operating expense. That's what the ordinance says. That was not amended in 2018. Our budget puts forward 5.6% of that. We are following council's ordinance, and the Emergency Stabilization Fund does reside in the budget book under your purview. So yes, it is council's budget line item, but we propose the estimates of revenue. We need to balance the budget with that money, and we set the amount within the confines of the council ordinance. 5.6% is what it's at.
So my question is this restating the revenues that the county executive did? Is that?
I would argue that it does, because there is a transfer out when we need that money to balance the budget. First of all, it knocks the budget out of balance. And second of all, based on rule number 1 that I pointed out earlier today, there is an expense cut, obviously, from the budget without a corresponding entry under the budget line items, so.
So, seeing that, I mean, this is 5 million, and previous was 3 million, and as we talk about it, we're at 5, 6, 7, 8, $9 million. That we're
Well,
changing the-
so I know there are separate amendments, but if I could talk about that first one that knocked it out of alignment, the amount of money based on Mr. Goffredo's standard and his math, if you just look at the general fund, which means no strings attached money, it's not other people's money or anything like that, a cut of 2.5% is only worth $769,500.
What you're saying is that's our tax revenue,
Yes,
not
that's
pass-through
our
money.
tax revenue, that's the non-pass-through money.
Right, 'cause we can't
Then you
touch-
start getting into, so if you cut 2.5% in expenses, like say from children and youth, so you're doing it in 2 separate spots. So you're cutting, which means I have to put in the minimum amount to draw down the block grant money, okay, for children and youth. And I believe that's a 90-10 split. Others are 80-20. So when I'm saying it's a 2-part math problem, it's a 2-part math problem because some of that is county contribution, and I could cut that 2.5%, which means I can't draw down as much money, and I don't know exactly how much money I'm not drawing down, which could be a cut to children and youth of higher than 2.5%. It could be a cut to Area Agency on Aging and those special revenue funds. Not to mention, you cut farmland preservation, that's fine, that's a commitment in the budget. But again, you're cutting farmland preservation, and some of that money out there is encumbered for specific projects. You wanted the answer to your why certain money isn't spent every year, because the budget is a static 1/1 to 12/31. Now, what you don't see after the budget is passed, and Mr. Brown could tell you that there are certain funds that are encumbered, projects started. So money from the capital budget, which was expected to be spent, say, in 2024, might not be finished up until at some point in 2025. So we roll that money as a matter of the encumbrances being there, and roll that over to the next year. So if we don't have the money to balance the budget this year, okay, regardless of where we finish out the year, we might not have the money to meet our required encumbrances for this year, and to roll the money. The bottom line is, right now in the budget as proposed, the executive's budget, has an unrestricted, unreserved fund balance of approximately $692,000 plus the emergency stabilization fund of $8 million. That's what's there. Now, you talk about, we don't always have all the positions filled and stuff like that. We have vacancy factors worked into the budget. For the first time this year, the court said, yes, we're going to have a vacancy factor. So the courts have already really worked with the administration and worked with the citizens of Northampton County to get a really good budget put together. You're now cutting that 2.5% more. And I can't say what the courts are going to do. They probably haven't heard about this until the testimony today. So I don't know how they're going to react to it. On top of that, we have a lot of commitments that have been made in previous budgets, commitments that this council made that the county executive has moved forward on in good faith. Have to revisit all of those. So there is truly only $692,000 if you look at the bottom line. Everything else is a projection, and while I hope some revenues come in, they may not. And the timing of it may be that I have to roll an encumbrance over to be able to meet those revenue expenses, and that happens in December while council doesn't meet. But what you're doing is giving us the authority with this budget to be able to work all of that out. And we're getting down. The county executive has been very clear in his directive to me. We are no longer overtaxing the citizens of Northampton County. We are now 2 years out from a tax decrease, okay? We are down to what the county needs to be lean and mean. We wanted to borrow the money to accelerate the P3 project and take care of the aging garage and the deck.
That's where I disagree with your logic, because Mr. McClure might be out of office in a year, and he'll have taken that balance from 16 million down to 6, and then he'd also take a $64 million loan that he'd be putting on the taxpayer. So, yeah, I disagree with the logic completely.
You can disagree.
And the fact is that if we pass this, you will have to find a way to balance the budget. Now, courts, I don't.
Excuse me, Mr. Gafredo has the floor.
That's all right.
Mr. Barron, I don't like coming up and saying, well, once the courts find out, maybe they'll sue you. I don't like the sideways threats. I don't like you coming up here telling us, my math is wrong. 2.5% of $116 million is less, right what I said it was. I don't have the budget amendment open to my page anymore.
I'm sure your math is correct, but your misunderstanding of what those numbers mean in the book is the problem.
Listen, I knew this wasn't going to be something that you'd be smiling about, and I know it's not as simple as going across the board, across operations, and cutting every line item 2.5%. Some are necessities, some there's fluff, guaranteed, because you don't have a $30 million windfall without having fluff. So if we need these radios, which we're being told we do, we're going to fund the radios, and I want you to figure out how to fund them. That's it. If it gets passed.
Our budget stands as proposed.
If not, if it gets amended.
So if there's no further discussion or questions on this, would someone make a motion to present this to council?
I guess I have another question. So if we're taking $5 million, John, out of what they were going to take it out of the financial stabilization fund, what was that $5 million funding?
No, I think they
They were taking it out.
They were
$16
taking it
million.
out.
They took $5 million out. Somewhere in the budget, it's funding $5 million.
I just looked it up, and I
things.
think it says they're taking 10 million out. And according,
10
on
million.
page 28 in the general government program, council's budget was cut 10 million. Was that not part of the financial stabilization? Is that not where you told me it resided when we reviewed that?
It resides in council's budget, and to answer the question that was posed, some of it is to balance the 2024 budget. So the budget that council has in existence today could be an issue with rolling some of the money for the capital we promised in 2024, and we don't have a balanced budget for 2025 if that's removed. If it resides in the stabilization fund, it's not a balanced budget.
Steve, before you walk away, the 2024 budget was projected to come in at $431 million of spend. We had a projection of $553 million. How are we not balanced?
Well, we have right now, we have shown what all of our, we've shown what all of our expenses are going to be, okay? We need money from the fund balance to do that. So basically, what you've done with your 2.5% cut for 2025,
I'm asking you about 2024.
2024, well,
I asked
if
you-
I can't meet some of the encumbrances and I can't roll the money, we could potentially be out of balance for 2024 when we close the books. I don't know where those numbers are going to be. It depends on the vacancy factors, what revenues come in that we've projected, and how close we're going to be. It's going to be really tight.
Yeah, I also see a revenue projection of 553 for the budget of 24, and we only got in 393. Where's the 140, 150 million dollar?
So some of that was, so you're looking at, again, the finite time. So you have to remember that budget you're looking at budget book to budget book. You have not accounted for all the amendments that happened within those years. So remember, we only get human service money in like half-year tranches because it's on that fiscal year. So we don't know exactly what that money is going to be. So while you see $100-some million that may or may not have come in, there's a budget amendment that explains all that away. Again, you have to look at where the budget amendment is, and all of that is outlined.
So when you project 393, is that not projecting what the year-end fiscal, with all of the money that's not realized yet? You're not figuring what you think it will end up being? Or
You're
you just don't know?
you're looking at beginning of budget year and beginning of budget year.
So
You're
not
not
fiscal
looking
year.
at any changes, not any changes during the year. And projections are just that, projections. If you look at the financial statements, you will see where we come out and where our position is. And when we cut taxes, okay, that's 8 million and 8 million, so that's $16 million, and that continues to compound each year. So what we've done is we've gotten the budget down. So we've cut each year we've been here. We've cut about, on average, about 3.5% each year, but not across the board cuts, because we can't do that, because a county government deals with other people's money. We get it as a pass-through. So when I say the budget isn't balanced, and you say I have to cut across all departments, I have legal obligations outside of county council that I
understand that.
must meet.
Why are
And
you cutting
so-
taxes, though, if you're not balancing budget? It's like, and
We
then
cut
you're
taxes 2
draining
years
Financial
ago.
stabilization fund to cover your balance. Like, it seems like you're kind of.
The financial stabilization fund was at 15, close to 15%. 10% too high in the county executive's opinion. So we are no longer overtaxing our citizens. We've cut their taxes. We're taking it back, and we're meeting the financial, like, the Republican county council said 5% was enough. We took our budget, and that's a sliding number. It depends on what our total general fund balance is. So Mr. Brown and the members of county council created the Emergency Stabilization Fund, which I agree with. But at 5% is where it should be right now.
Now, follow my logic. You cut taxes, which
Mm-hmm.
is great. I love that you cut taxes. But if there's only $6 million left in financial stabilization fund, what covers the shortfall next year? Because
We
you have
don't-
less revenue coming in, and now the pool of money that you use to balance the budget is dwindled down.
I don't believe in 2025, when we get to the end of 2025, we will have an emergency stabilization fund. We will have tax revenues, including all the changes that are going to come in, and we are growing at 3 to 4% per year. With that formula, keeping expenses flat, I don't have to raise taxes next year. I don't have to raise taxes in 2027 or 2028 either.
Then why do you have
So-
to take for the financial stabilization fund to balance this budget?
Because we are overtaxing our residents, and we cannot.
All right, thank you.
We're overtaxing our residents.
Okay, you could ask the same question 8 billion different times. What happens if the budget isn't balanced? Like what,
You could, Lamont.
To my knowledge, no county council has ever been that irresponsible. I would argue that in the first instance, the charter requires the passage of a balanced budget. And that if the budget wasn't balanced, we go through the process it's still not balanced, at the end, I would argue then it defaults to the provision in the charter that says the proposed budget of the executive becomes the law. But I don't know that Mr. Spadoni would agree with me about that. He would have to probably think about that.
No, I've written a memo to the board last, if I may.
Oh,
There's a memo last week as to the procedure. He's correct. That if there is a budget and it's vetoed and it doesn't survive, we adopt the budget until council acts.
But that's not what he said. He didn't talk about the veto. He said if the budget isn't balanced, she asked, what if the budget isn't balanced, what happens? He said, and he didn't say veto, he said, if it can't be done, it defaults back to his. So that's a separate process that you articulated.
so my argument would be, Mr.
If I
Spadoni,
may.
go, I'm sorry.
I am bound by the Home Rule Charter, and I am referring specifically to section 704B, C, and D. It gives council the authority to amend the budget. There are some limitations, as you heard previously from Mr. Barron, that they cannot delete or decrease any items required by law or for debt service or for estimated cash deficits. Council cannot modify estimates of revenue submitted by the county executive, and they cannot increase the authorized expenditures to an amount greater than the total of estimated funds available. I think that we're referring to that as the balanced budget.
So then if you're saying that, and you're seeing all these things, everything that's been proposed here tonight does not violate any of those things, as you have just articulated them, correct? They're alluding to the fact that they won't be able to balance the budget, but what I've heard so far is money in, money out, and it's followed all the rules that they've articulated. And we didn't even pass this last one yet.
I understand that. Let me be clear. I don't have a dog in the fight as to which way this goes. My job is to tell you what you can and cannot do under the Home Rule Charter. What you do is your business as elected legislators.
So, again, the answer to your question, from my perspective, is you're required to pass a balanced budget. When Ms. Vargo is correct, when we get through the whole process, if at the end it's not balanced, I would argue that it's a nullity, because the charter requires a balanced budget, and therefore our proposed budget would become law. Otherwise, it would be a standoff, and the lights would go off on January 1st.
So if we took the dramatics out of your answer.
Well, it's not
serious-
dramatic.
No, it is, because,
Well-
here's what I don't understand.
Sure.
I've been here as long as you've been here.
Sure.
Every single year, we've given you a budget, we've passed your budget, we've done a few amendments, nothing egregious.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And none of these have actually come to fruition, we're just in the discussion point. But if we do pass what's been proposed here, is it not your obligation then to figure out how to make it work?
No,
You're saying it's not.
no.
Okay. Now, you do have the right to veto, and I understand that.
Well, the
But-
budget that's passed and ultimately becomes law must be balanced. That's,
But if if he says, and his thing goes through, that he wants to cut 2.5%, we can do that. We have the right to do that, and that's the budget we pass. I mean, this council has done nothing untoward ever, as long as you've been here, as long as I've been here. So he's proposing a cut. Again, it may not go through, but
if it's,
this council could say, we want to raise taxes, correct?
it could, yes.
Right? We could say, we want to cut
I
taxes.
probably won't get 6 votes for that, though.
I understand. I'm just being hypothetical like
And you would
everybody
need
else
6
has
votes for
been
that.
all night long. It's just that this council could do whatever it wants to do with this budget.
Well,
And can pass it, as long as it follows the aforementioned rules that he gave us.
as long as it's balanced when it's done.
Okay.
If it's not
But what
balanced,
I
it's not
think I'm
passed.
hearing is concerning, and I'm not trying to get into it, Mr. Spadoni, is that the idea of what's balanced and what's not seems to be arbitrary to you guys, because he's doing math, and you're doing math, and somehow the math isn't adding up. I don't understand. If this council says, we're cutting taxes, and you have to figure out what to do with the rest, that's your job. That's your job. I mean, we've followed this whole thing, we've done it. I think people are playing fair here. I understand. And again, nothing's been passed, but
So I think.
I guess what I'm not saying, and I'm going around the bushes, council's never challenged any of your budgets excessively. And I see 2 or 3 items here that are challenging. So instead of threatening, how can we make this work? And how can council get through this process tonight?
Well,
Because I hear threats, and
past-
I don't appreciate
Well, no,
that.
they aren't, Ms. Fargo Hefner, they're not threats. I mean, these are, you gave me a lecture about jokes earlier and the seriousness of the process. This is very serious. If you pass a budget where revenues do not equal expenditures, that's unbalanced. The charter prohibits that. There is no budget then. And then I would argue that there are one of 2 outcomes. One, on December 31st at midnight, we run out of money. Or 2, my budget as proposed becomes law. And I don't know where that would come down. I think that's probably how it would come out, because the budget requirement of being in balance, I think, is a primary dictate of the charter. It's got to be balanced. So your amendments will be cost out, and you'll see whether they're in balance or not. And they won't be, and then you'll have decisions to make.
Mr. McClure, just to
Yeah, sure.
clarify, would cutting expenditures put the budget out of balance?
The way you've proposed your amendment does.
You explain so?
Mr. Barron did.
I don't need Mr. Ray to explain. I thought, I didn't hear anybody say it the way that made sense to me, but spending less doesn't seem to be putting our budget out of balance in my eyes, but I don't know, maybe I'm missing something.
That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions?
Still on $5 million, right?
Yes, sir? Hearing none, would someone make,
Motion to move it forward to vote
Yes.
on at the council meeting? Yeah, motion.
second the motion?
Second.
Call for the vote.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan? No. Mr. Kraft? No. Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes?
Mr. Corpora?
No.
Adopted by a vote of 4 to 3.
Next, we have DCED COVID response grants, future grants. Are there any questions or comments regarding the removal of $775,000 from DCED COVID response grants, future grants, partially fund the P25 radio project?
I have one question.
Yes.
It is a COVID grant being used for radios. Are we allowed to do that? Can we take a COVID grant for COVID response and then take $775 out of it and put it to the P25, for the P25 project? Asking a question. Is that allowed? Because it's earmarked for COVID response grants. Anybody know?
I think we used COVID money for the
Previously.
P25 last year, did we not? Or 2 years ago when we had the
Yeah,
opportunity
I
to fund it?
I don't know how that works. So, Steve?
I think that there's certain allowable expenses.
just
And I
don't know.
thought EMS projects were
EMS
part of
is
that, but
part
I
of
am
that,
not, I am not an expert.
The ARP says for public safety. So there is a specific category. We did give some money to P25. I don't know if it was specifically for the P25 itself, but
Right.
there were public safety grants that were given. And it was, I think we had 5 million in there.
Yeah, it was 5 million.
5 million?
Yes, from ARP.
ARP. So he can use this 775 for the P25 radios?
The $1 million that was sitting in future grant was for agency nurses at Graysdale. So
Oh, just-
you're making the choice between the agency nurses at Graysdale, as we proposed, versus the P25 radios.
The P25 is in the budget for, right now, for what they're doing.
The
where they're at.
2020, to be very clear, the 2025 budget, along with the roll from 2024, as you heard from now me and Mr. Weaver, okay, says there is enough money to pay for the P25 infrastructure that causes no public safety issue.
Okay, thank you. So we're not, so if we're taking it from the nurses, I'm going to be a no again. Sorry, John.
I would just like to make a comment that you now have $1 million rather than 775 because my amendment was withdrawn, so you have more money. If you wanted to
similar
amend the amount.
It can't get amended later at the council meeting, right? Once
I
we
don't
pass
know.
the board,
I'm gonna rely on,
Can amend it?
can we amend it on, at the
Can amend it
time?
up to the adoption of the budget.
Okay, he's saying we can. If no other comments, call for the vote.
Motion.
Motion, sorry.
I'll motion.
Second. Did I hear a second?
You seconded, I thought.
Okay, I'll second it. I'll call for the vote.
Mr. Gafredo?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo Hefner?
Yes.
Ms. Keegan?
No.
Mr. Kraft? Mr. Warren? I'm sorry, I apologize. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Corpora?
Yes.
Mr. Giovanni?
Yes.
Passes by a vote of 5 to 2.
Thank you. Is there any other business to be done this evening? I believe that's allowed. Is all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So Aileen, just so you know, here's what you're gonna get from this. Okay. You're going to get the cost breakdown of the amendment with the correct amendments and how they're out of balance, and then figure it out. It'll clearly show it's out of
Not
balance.
to apologize.
And not,
I know it's not you, but I want you to know from the expectation of what.
you answered the question.
What was that? And I don't want you to, it'll be a bit different, but it'll show you all the numbers and why. And so,
Well, when I'm trying to ask a serious question,